All right, so I've got really good numbers on all these cylinders except for 2 and 6. 6 is showing like 50 pounds. Well, guys, I'm on the way to Chicago, Illinois to pick up a motor for the Firebird. I kind of had a choice to make between going with a 350, what was originally in that car when it was built, versus a 400. And I decided to go ahead and go with the 350, and then tried to find one, and that was not easy. I looked along quite a while before I finally found one. This guy in Chicago has one that came out of 1970 Catalina, I think, and it supposedly has 52,000 original miles on it, and has everything that came with it. It had headers, so it doesn't have manifolds, exhaust manifolds, so I got to decide what to do about that, but I'll show you more when I get there. I've still got a couple hours of driving left. Well, I'm in Chicago. I just picked up the motor, and you probably can't see it, but there's Kaminsky Field right behind me. I am in the midst of Chicago. It's not a suburb, so. Well, I made it back home. I'm back in the garage finally. That was a very, very long day. So it was over 13 hours of driving. So here is the motor. It rained on me most of the way back, and the guy had it shrink wrapped. So that was good. And this is how I had it strapped in. Got her sitting on a tire, and then strapped where it can't go left or right. And then he gave me a plate to lift it with. He had there, and I covered all the holes in the top of that plate with duct tape, so hopefully we didn't get any water down in the intake. Okay, so here it is with the plastic cut back, and this thing does not even have any grease on it. So it's either been rebuilt or cleaned. It's definitely been put back together since it's been running, I think. Anyway, there's the code, which is 0333091YU. So I'll look up that, see what it means. But this is all, looks to me like it's all Pontiac, everything, which is what I want. Except it's got Edelbrock valve covers. Here's the back side of it. So I've got a casting code up here, 9799916, I think. And then another code on the heads, 1608101. So I'll try to look all that up. This car was on an automatic. I'm going to switch this over, of course, to a manual. So I'll need to get a different flywheel for the clutch and the bell housing and all that stuff. So got to find all that to match it. All right, so I looked up the engine codes on this database that's on the parts place. It shows engine Pontiac codes. So here is ours. It's the YU, and so it's a 350 Pontiac from a 1970, which is what he said. 255 horse. It was an automatic transmission. The Power Glide L30. I'll figure out what that is. And 1x2 means that 2-barrel carburetor on it originally, and then that 9799916 was our casting code on the box. So everything matches to what he said. Okay, so here is the Pontiac 350 unloaded on an engine stand, and this thing is big. Pontiac 350 is known as a big block. It's not like the small block 327 Chevy that came out of here. This is actually, they say, the same size as a 400. It's just how it's bored out. A 400 is bored out different for different size pistons and other stuff, but basically the same size engine. When I look at it compared to this is the little 327. I mean, it just looks way bigger. I have to learn about this thing. I don't know anything about Pontiacs. The first thing I notice is that the heads have these little downward things that hook to your exhaust manifold, so your exhaust manifold is like bolting up to those where, like on a Chevy, your exhaust manifolds bolt straight in to the side of the block. So I don't know what the purpose of that was, why they designed it like that, but kind of cool. So I think we're going to go with manifolds and then just try to get a nice exhaust to it. But I don't really want to put headers on this. And I don't know the story behind this thing because it looks like it's been apart. You can see, you know, the gaskets and you can feel sealant and stuff on here. So it's been apart. I don't know what all has been apart. This intake is, remember this was from the codes, we know this was originally a 2-barrel carb. So that's a 4-barrel top. So I have to look up and see what this intake was from. It's got a chrome oil pan. It looks new. These Edelbrock valve covers are new. So I don't know what was going on with this thing. Why they didn't use it. I want to get a cradle for it, an engine cradle that sits on the ground where I can actually hook a flywheel to it, and the engine cradle holds it on the motor mount areas so that you can actually run it. And so I want to do that so we can kind of figure out what's going on with it before we actually put it in the car. But also what came with it was these 3 containers of parts. So I haven't really looked through this yet. Looks like motor mounts. Here's the flywheel, which that is thin, but that should be for a automatic, I guess. Here's another pulley, which I don't know why we have another pulley, what that's from. I must have taken all this off, getting ready to paint it, maybe. Here's our starter, which looks like a new rebuilt one, AC Delco. Here's our carb. There's our alternator. There's a bracket probably for the alternator. I don't know what carb this is, but it is a 4-barrel, so that's good. So we don't have to worry about trying to switch this over to a 4-barrel. It's already been done. Ha, it's a Rochester. That's what I had on my 69 Vet. And we've got our fan, power steering pump. There's our fuel pump, long arm on it. Our distributor, which is obviously a replacement at some point. Somebody's replaced that, which that's fine. And we've got hoses and belts, oil pressure gauge, and temp gauge for water. This is supposedly, you want to start this vehicle on a cradle. This tells you what all to hook up, and you can start it out of the car. Look at that, it's an ignition key and everything. So that is really cool. We're going to use all this. Okay, so I'm doing a little just checking around on this engine to see exactly what I think is going on with it as far as what the last guy did with it. And so I took the bolts out of this valve cover, and I'm going to see what shape the rocker arms and all that are in. They look brand new. I mean, all that does not look like it's hardly ever been ran. There's oil up in the top of it, like has ran, but that has been rebuilt. It's got to have been. So I'll be anxious to get this thing down on a cradle stand where I can hook a flywheel to it and the starter and just crank it over and check compression. And because I don't really want to do anything else to it until I know the compression is good on all the cylinders. And if it is, we're going to start scrubbing this thing down and getting ready for paint. And then I found some exhaust manifolds I got ordered, so they'll be coming in, and we'll get this thing painted. And I got to finish rebuilding the Muncie transmission over there, and then we will I also have to find a bell housing. Once we get all that together, we can start think about getting it put back in after we get the engine bay all cleaned up. Okay, so it's been a couple weeks since I filmed that last little clip you saw, and I've just been trying to go through all the parts that I got from the guy that I bought the motor from, and just see if I had all the bolts and what went where and all that. So I put the oil filter housing on, the bolts were for that, and I've got the engine filled with oil, got the filter filled with oil, just got stuff sitting around on it so I could know where it went, like there's the carburetor, it's not bolted on, but I found the EGR valve and the bracket and everything that hooks it up. But what I want to do today is, now that I've got oil in this, and now that I've got an engine cradle, is to hook this back up to my hoist get the pressure off of this engine stand, disconnect the engine stand, hook up my starter, get it bolted on, and then put the whole thing in the engine cradle, get it on the ground. And then I have a whole bunch of new parts. I've got a flywheel and bolts for the manual transmission. I've got my new bell housing. I've got new manifolds, or not new ones, but ones that I got from off eBay that I need to sandblast because somebody sprayed painted them silver. I've got in that box, I've got the clutch and the clutch housing or the pressure plate. I've got a whole rebuild kit with all the bushings and everything for the front suspension is all in there. Got lots of stuff I can finally do. First thing first is I want to check compression on this engine. So we'll get that off, get it put on the cradle, flywheel installed, and then get it to where we can actually crank it over with a battery and go from there, see what this thing sounds or looks like. All right, so I've got the motor on the cradle sitting on the ground, and that was not easy. You have to, if you're ever doing that, it helps to loosen up the bolts on the actual cradle first so that you got movement on both of the wings so you can kind of move everything around. And then once you get all the bolts started on the engine, tighten the ones back up on the cradle and then tighten the engine ones up, and you can kind of force it all to go where it's supposed to go. So got the starter mounted on also there. So the next thing is to get our flywheel put on with our flywheel bolts, then try to get some power to our starter and see if we can get it cranking over. So it's got oil in it, so it should pump oil, so it's not doing everything dry. Also, I wouldn't mind using a Dremel with a little wire brush and wire wheel and cleaning that out in there. That's where the pilot bushing goes when we get our clutch and all that on there, and it will be hard to clean out later. So I'll do that, and then we'll get the flywheel installed. All right, so I've got the flywheel on. Believe it or not, those bolts, even though they're all even, they're all a little bit different. So they go on one way. So that's on, and then I've got the starter wired up to that battery. I've got my compression tester connected to cylinder 1. We'll crank it over and see what cylinder 1's got. All right, so here goes nothing. So that one is 110 on 1. So I'm going to go through these and check them one by one, and I'll let you know at the end what we've got. All right, so I'm done with the compression test, and there are the numbers. So it's one cylinder had 120, and the rest were 110 or 100, and a couple 90s. That seems kind of low. I'm going to do a little bit of research and figure out what's normal on these things. See if I need to check like the valve, make sure the valves are all adjusted correctly, and because if somebody redid the valves and then ran it and didn't recheck them, there could be some valves that are letting the compression, through. So I just need to look more into it. All right, so I think the first thing I'm going to do is do a little test here and look at one of the cylinders that had one of the lowest pressures, like number 6. And I just ran it again and got about 100 pounds on there. It had 90 earlier. But one of the ways to test and see if your rings are letting air go past the rings during compression is to dump about a teaspoon of oil, like 10W30 oil, in the cylinder. What that'll do is coat the sides of the cylinder wall and create a better seal so that no blow by or nothing blows by the rings. And if your compression goes up, then you know that your rings are wore. If the compression stays about the same, then it's probably not the rings, it's probably valves or something else like that. So, okay, I think I have problems with this compression gauge because I just ran the compression test on cylinder 3 there. And last time I did it, it was at 120. And this time I did it, it was 135. And I don't have any oil in there. I think a lot of it depends on how tight you get that in there. And it's really hard. Like you can't get in there to tighten it up. You have to kind of use the tip of your finger to tighten it. And it's just an O-ring pressing up against, the end of the threads. And then to get it out is really hard. I got to stick a screwdriver on there and try to twist it as I'm turning it out. It's supposed to be able to just be twisted out like this. But when you twist it, it just spins on there. So I'm wondering if it's leaking air through there. So I need to make sure I've got a really good compression gauge so I can know for sure what my readings are before I do anything drastic. So I'll work on that. Okay, so what I did was I put some tape on my compression tester right here to keep that from twisting whenever I screw it in. The brass fitting on the end was twisting on the hose, and so I did that, tightened, got it in there really tight, and on this first cylinder, cranked it up again, I got 165 pounds, which I had 110 last time. And I did it on cylinder 3, and I had 120 last time, and I got 160 this time. So I'm just going to keep on going down the row and see what they all say. And if they all are up there 150 or more, I'm not doing anything to it, because that's good enough for me. All right, so we just checked all the compression numbers on all these cylinders, and Mr. Andrew is here with me now over Christmas break. And he has got a new little toy.
This is an endoscope. So the cool thing about this is you can plug this into your phone, run this all down in all the cylinders, and then you can see it's got a little light on the end of it, and you can flip the camera around, you can look side to side, and we can check on the condition of the cylinder heads and see how fresh this thing is, because from the outward appearance it looks like it's a pretty new or freshly redone engine, but the inside might tell a different story.
Yeah, so we're going to hook your phone to it, and then we'll show you on the video, hopefully through the eyes of that Boroscope. All right, so we're going to look into cylinder 8 here. We cranked the engine over to where the piston is down at its lowest point. So Andy's got the camera pointing and the lights pointing forward so he could see what's straight ahead of it.
Ooh, look at that. That looks almost new.
Huh. What's with the little,
You got your cross hatching still on the cylinder walls. I mean, this looks like it's almost never even been ran.
Okay, so it's got to be just the stupid compression tester that's causing me to have weird numbers. All right, so we started looking at these cylinders, and we looked at those first 3 and saw how nice and clean they were in there. Like the heads, the top of the cylinders or top of the pistons were clean and new looking. And when we get to this last one, cylinder 2, the top of the head looks like it's got some corrosion going on. It's just different than the rest of them. And all I can say is it probably, see that little rust spot right there? There was some water sitting in there. Looks like, I bet whoever power washed this engine got some water past the plug and it sat in there until it evaporated. But hopefully it's okay. Like when we do a compression test, if it's got good compression, then I'm not gonna worry about that. But it definitely is different than the other ones. You can see the cross hatching on it, but it's not as pronounced as the on the other cylinders. But yeah, there was definitely some corrosion in there. But, you know, once you run it, it'll burn all that off, probably. Is that the valve?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, see, that looks new. This has been rebuilt for sure. All right, so let's look on this other side. This is cylinder 1.
That looks brand new.
Like it was just rebuilt. Huh. All right, let's look at the next one.
Cylinder 2.
Looks new.
Not cylinder 2, we're on cylinder 3. Looks brand new.
All right, this is cylinder 5.
Yep. Same as the other.
Looks new.
Yep.
And 7.
Mm-hmm.
So the only one that looks different at all is cylinder 2. All right, so one of the things we're going to do when we're checking this, and again, we still haven't got our compression tester in to test for sure what our compression is, but we had that issue on the number 2 cylinder to where we had like some discoloration and stuff. Andy showed you on the little Boroscope. What we're going to do now is check our valve adjustment and make sure that we've got our valves are opening and closing when they're supposed to. Okay, guys, I'm going to change strategies here on this. You're trying to get all these valves adjusted. I really don't know what I have here. Like, I don't know if I've got hydraulic lifters. I think I do in there. I want to get to where I can see down in that valley so I can really adjust these things the right way. The way we were trying to do it a while ago is not, I mean, it works pretty well, but it's not a tried and true 100% sure method. So I want to go ahead and take off that intake and that cover for the valley so I can see down in there exactly what's going on, and then we can adjust these right and make 100% sure it's the way it's supposed to be. So let me get all this stuff off and we'll see what's down in there. All right, so we can now see finally what we've got in here. There's our cam and our different lobes on there. Here's our hydraulic lifters riding on the cam. They're spring loaded. Our push rod going in there up to our rocker arm. So now we can adjust these things by sight and really see what we're doing. And there's a great video on YouTube that, other than this one, that shows how to do that. But I'll show you here too how we're going to do it, and then we'll be 100% sure that we have this right so that we can check compression and all that and just make sure that we're good going forward. Let me explain a little bit how this works. Here is our firing order for Pontiac, 184366572. So we're going to put our firing order down the line like that on the list, and then we're going to split the engine in two, 4 cylinders down, 4 on top, 4 on bottom. Then we're going to start with the bottom 4, move them up to the top, 6572, and then the top one's down at the bottom on this side, 1843. So we're going to get into position, which I'll show you what that is here in a minute, cylinder 1, and when it's in position, we're going to adjust cylinder 6, and then get 8 into position, adjust cylinder 5, and so forth. So when I've got the word rock on there, which means to get it into position, which is here's our cylinder 1 and our 2 lifters. And so we've got, remember, this is our exhaust side, our exhaust valve. It's over our exhaust port. And so we're going to crank the engine over until the exhaust lifter opens and closes, or raises and lowers. And when it has raised and lowered, the intake lifter will start to just barely start to raise. And so when that happens, both of these we want them both in the same position. And when that happens, then we're ready to adjust number 6. Remember, we've got 1, 3, 5, 7, and then 2, 4, 6, 8. So I will go through here, adjust, get this one in position, and adjust 6 right now, and then we'll just go down the line and get all this set. And so we're not going to spin the rods like some people say. It's not as accurate. Like they say that you're supposed to spin the push rod and adjust it until you can just barely spin it and then go another half turn. We're going to go up and down. Okay, so we're going to get 0 lash by tightening the nut until we get no movement up and down. And then we're going to go 3/4 of a turn after that, and that's going to set it. We're going to rotate this cam, like I said, until the exhaust opens, closes, and then the intake just barely starts to open. Get all this stuff out of the way. Okay, so here comes the high part on the lobe for the exhaust side. So you're going to see this exhaust start to raise up. See it raising up. That's its peak. Now it's going to start going back down, and the intake is going to start coming up. Now they're even. So now I'm going to come over here to number 6, and I'm going to adjust this until I have 0 up and down movement. So those are 0 lash. And don't worry about the side to side movement. You're going to have side to side movement. You want to have 0 up and down movement. Of course, when you push it, you can get it because it's spring loaded down in that lifter, but you want to have 0 movement up and down, just slack. So now we've got that, so we're going to set this 3/4 turn more. So that will be our wrench turned all the way over and then back to this direction. And that seems like very little, but that should be correct. And if you could see inside these, there's a little spring right here, a little clip going across there, a little piece of metal, and you want your lifter to not hit that when it comes back up. All right, so now I'm going to rotate it. My number 8 cylinder is right here, so I'm going to rotate this over until the exhaust lifter, goes up and down, do the same thing as we did before. And my exhaust one is on this one right here. And when you're doing it this way, you just barely have to crank the motor over any to get to the next section, the next step. So just a little bit. You see that exhaust lifter is already coming up, or it's already been up, so it's going down. So it's going down, the other one should start coming up. Right there is where they're even. Okay, so I just barely had to move the engine over. So now they are in the right spot, and we're going to adjust 5. And I'm just going to keep on going. All right, so all the valves are adjusted correctly, and I know for sure they're right. And I went ahead and stuck my compression tester in my cylinder 8, which was before showing 0 compression. And now I have 160 pounds, which is groovy.
How do you feel?
Groovy.
So I'm going to go through and check all the compression in all of them, and we'll see what we've got. And now we'll know for sure if this engine is ready to start putting it back together. All right, so I've got really good numbers on all these cylinders except for 2 and 6. 6 is showing like 50 pounds. I mean, 2 is showing like 115, which is still way better than the 90 it showed earlier, but that's still low. 6, when I crank it over, you know, the cam's moving and you can see the load moving up and down the lifter, but my rocker arm is not moving. So I got something going on with that valve. It could be a bent valve or something, or maybe I just don't have it adjusted, but I've adjusted it twice in the right way, and it seems like it's where it's supposed to be on the tightness. It's almost like the lifter's wore out and the spring is too springy in there or something. I might try temporarily just to change that lifter out, put another one from another cylinder in there and see if that starts to move it. If it does, we'll know it's the lifter. Alright, so I swapped lifters with cylinder 2 and 6 on the intake. When we crank this over, if this one moves again, we know if it does, we know it was the lifter. Okay, it was moving, but not anywhere near as much as last time. So let me put a compression tester on there and see if it increased the value of it any. Okay, so I ran it again with that other lifter in there, and I got 145 pounds. So definitely the lifter. All right, so even with that lifter on that other cylinder over there, I cranked it and it got 130 pounds that time. So I think I've got good compression in all these cylinders. It's just the valve or the lifters are giving me weird readings. I don't know if it's because of the amount of oil that's in them or what, but I feel confident that these cylinders are good. I'll keep digging here and see if I just need to order some new lifters while I'm in here and replace them and then have that peace of mind. All right, so I've got ordered new lifters for this thing. While I'm waiting for those to come in, I really need to clean all this up, this valley. So I need to get all the old sealant, blue sealant off of there. I need to get this cork gasket off for the valley pan and clean all of it up. And then it's super important that we don't get any of that crud down in that valley. I mean, any little piece of anything can clog up, like that little hole right there on the lifter. It could cause a catastrophe. So we don't want anything down in there. So I'm going to cover that with a towel or tape some paper over it or something so nothing can fall down in there. And then I probably won't video all the cleaning, but I'll do a lot of scraping and cleaning, and I'll show you when I get finished. Okay, I'm cleaning away on this thing. One of the things I wondered is if these lifters had ever been replaced, because when we were looking at the cylinders with the camera, and it looked like the pistons were either new or been cleaned, and the cross hatching on the cylinder walls looked so new, and the valves looked new, and everything just looked like it had been rebuilt. But look at here, we have paint from whoever painted the engine on top of this cork gasket from the valley pan. This gasket looks pretty old. So to me, it doesn't look like anybody's been in the valley. So you have to get in the valley to change the lifters. So I would say these are the older lifters. So that's a good thing. That's the reason that we were having issues with our compression. So that gives me hope that when the new ones come in, all that will be resolved. All right, so it's been a few hours, and I've got this thing really clean. I still want to go over it a little bit more with some these little buffer wheels I got for a Dremel. These little things here, they do a good job. You just have to make sure everything's covered because they kind of come apart and it'll shoot that little fuzzy stuff everywhere. And then scraping all the blue sealant off. There would be some that gets way up in there, and you end up having to play a game of operations with your tweezers, trying to get it in there without your buzzer going off. But anyway, that part's done. I've got all the gaskets and everything scraped off of the intake, and I've got all the holes taped and covered, and all the threaded screw holes, bolt holes filled. And I'm going to put this in the sandblaster and try to blast the paint off of that so that it'll be ready for paint. And then I'm going to work on these manifolds, trying to blast them while I've got all that going. But mainly just a lot of cleaning.
Well, that video was quite the roller coaster, huh? We went all the way from Chicago, Illinois, and picked up the engine to bringing it back, thinking, oh man, this thing's gonna be sweet, it's brand new. Oh no, it's got low compression. Oh no, it's actually not oh, but yeah, it still does have low compression. So just all over the place. Next week, like Dad said at the end of the video, I think he's gonna try to get the engine all cleaned up and ready to get the new lifters installed that he ordered. Hopefully those will be in, and then ultimately get ready for paint and just make that thing look brand new to put in the Firebird. So with that, it's time for our verse of the week, which is Philippians 4:13. It says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you hit the like button down below. Make sure you get subscribed and hit the bell so you're notified for all future projects that we have on this channel, including this 78 F100 behind me. See you guys next week. And always remember, don't retire it if you can rebuild it. Thanks so much, guys, for tuning in and watching this week's episode of Rebuild It. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on any awesome content. Have a good one.